there, welcome back to Mysteries Channel. I'm trying to get out videos, I promise I am. I am just now, we're in lockdown and I have kids, so I am doing a lot of cooking and cleaning and entertaining, if you know what I mean. Whenever I have a spare moment, I'm trying to read up on stuff, but it's hard, so bear with me. I promise I'm trying. Today's video is just going to be another installment of the book that I've been reading from. This would be Chapter 5 of the Children of Odin. So, let's get to it. How Brock brought judgment on Loki. It was then that Loki, with the wish of making the Aesir and the Vanir friendly to him, once more brought out the wonderful things that he had gained from the dwarves. The spear, Gungnir, and the boat, Skidbaldner. The Aesir and the Vanir marveled at things so wonderful. Loki gave the spear as a gift to Odin, and to Frey, who was chief of the Vanir, he gave the boat Skidbaldner. All Asgard rejoiced that things so wonderful and so helpful had been brought to them, and Loki, who made a great show of giving these gifts, said boastingly, "None but the dwarves who work for me could make such things. There are other dwarves, but they are unhandy as they are misshapen. The dwarves who are my servants are the only ones who can make such wonders." Now Loki, in his boastfulness, said a foolish thing. There were other dwarves besides those who worked for him, and one of these was there in Asgard. All unknown to Loki, he stood in the shadow of Odin's seat listening to what was being said. Now he went over to Loki, his little unshapely form trembling with rage. Brock, the most spiteful of all the dwarves. "Ha, Loki, you boaster!" he roared. "You lie in your words. Sindri, my brother, who would scorn to serve you, is the best smith in Svartheim." The Aesir and the Vanir laughed to see Loki outfaced by Brock the dwarf in the middle of his boastfulness. As they laughed, Loki grew angry. "Be silent, dwarf," he said. "Your brother will know about smith's work when he goes to the dwarves who are my friends and learns from them." "He learned from the dwarves who are your friends. My brother Sindri learned from the dwarves who are your friends," Brock roared in a greater rage than before. "The things that you have brought out of Svartheim would not be noticed by the Aesir and the Vanir if they were put beside the things my brother Sindri could make." "Sometime we will try your brother Sindri and see what he can do," said Loki. Try now, shouted Brock. "I will wager my head against yours, Loki, that his work will make the dwellers in Asgard laugh at your boasting." "I will take your wager," said Loki, "my head against yours, and glad will I be to see your ugly head off your misshapen shoulders. The Aesir will judge whether my brother's work is not the best that ever came out of Svartheim, and they will see to it that you will pay with your wager, Loki, the head off your shoulders. Will ye not sit in judgment, O dwellers in Asgard?" "We will sit in judgment," said the Aesir. Then, still full of rage, Brock the dwarf went down to Svartheim, to the place where his brother Sindri worked. There was Sindri in his glowing forge, working with the bellows and anvil and hammers beside him. All around him masses of metal, gold, silver, copper, and iron. Brock told his tale, how he had wagered his head against Loki's that Sindri could make things more wonderful than the spear and the boat that Loki had brought to Asgard. "You were right in what you said, my brother," said Sindri, "and you shall not lose your head to Loki. But the two of us must work together at what I am going to forge. It will be your work to keep the fire so that it will neither blaze up nor die down for a single instant. If you keep that fire as I tell you, we will forge a wonder. Now, brother, keep your hands upon the bells and keep your fire under control." Then into the fire Sindri threw not a piece of metal, but a pig's skin. Brock kept his hands on the bellows, working it so that the fire neither died down nor blazed up for a single instant. In the glowing fire, the pigskin swelled itself into a strange shape. But Brock was not left to work in the bellows in peace. Into the forge flew a gadfly. It lighted on Brock's hands and stung them. The dwarf screamed with pain, but his hands still held the bellows, working to keep that fire steady, for he knew that the gadfly was Loki and that Loki was striving to spoil Sindri's work. Again, the gadfly stung his hands, but Brock, although his hands felt like they were being pierced with hot iron, still worked the bellows so that the fire did not blaze up or die down for a single instant. Sindri came and looked into the fire. Over the shape that was rising, there he said the words of magic. The gadfly had flown away, and Sindri bade his brother cease working. He took the thing out that had been shaped in the fire, and he worked over it with his anvil. It was a wonder indeed. A boar, all golden, that could fly through the air, that shed light from its bristles as it flew. Brock forgot the pain in his hands and screamed with joy. "This is the greatest of wonders," he said. "The dwellers in Asgard will have to give judgment against Loki. I shall have Loki's head." But Sindri said, "The golden boar bristle may not be judged as a wonder as great as the spear Gungnir or the boat Skidbaldner. We must make something more wonderful still. Work the bellows as before, brother. Do not let the fire die down or blaze up for a single instant." Then Sindri took out a piece of gold that was so bright it lighted up the dark cavern that the dwarves worked in. He threw the piece of gold into the fire. Then he went to make ready something else and left Brock to work the bellows. The gadfly flew in again. Brock did not know it was there until it lighted on the back of his neck. It stung him till Brock felt pain was wrenching him apart. But still he kept his hands on the bellows, working it so that the fire neither blazed up nor died down for a single instant. When Sindri came back to look in the fire, Brock was not able to speak for the pain. Again, Sindri said the words of magic over the gold that was being smelted in the fire. He took it out of the glow and worked over on the main anvil. Then in a while, he showed Brock something that looked like the circle of their sun. "A splendid arm ring, my brother," he said. "An arm ring for the god's right arm, and this ring has hidden wonders. Every ninth night, 8 rings like itself will drop from this arm ring. For this is Draupnir, the ring of increase. To Odin, father of the gods, the ring shall be given," said Brock, "and Odin will have to declare that nothing so wonderful or so profitable to the gods has ever been brought into Asgard. O Loki, cunning Loki, I shall have thy head in spite of thy tricks." "Be not too hasty, brother," said Sindri. "What we have done so far is good, but better still must be the thing that will make the dwellers in Asgard give judgment that delivers Loki's head to thee. Work as before, brother. Do not let that fire blaze up or die down for a single instant." This time Sindri threw into the fire a bar of iron. Then he went away to fetch the hammer that would shape it. Brock worked the bellows as before, but only his hands were steady, for every part of him was trembling with the expectation of the gadfly's sting. He saw the gadfly dart into the forge. He screamed as it flew around him and around him, searching at a place where it might sting him more fearfully. It lighted down on his forehead, just between his eyes. The first sting it gave took the sight from his eyes. It stung again, and Brock felt the blood flowing down. Darkness filled the cave. Brock tried to keep his hands steady on the bellows, but he did not know whether the fire was blazing up or dying down. He shouted, and Sindri hurried up. Sindri said the words of magic over the thing that was in the fire. Then he drew it out. An instant more, he said, and the work would have been perfect. But because you let the fire die down for an instant, the work is not as good as it might have been made. He took what was shaped in the fire to the main anvil and worked it. Then Brock's eyesight came back to him, and he saw a great hammer, a hammer of all iron. The handle did not seem to be long enough to balance the head. This was because the fire had died down for an instant while it was being formed. "The hammer is Mjolnir," said Sindri, "and it is the greatest of the things that I am able to make. All in Asgard must rejoice to see this hammer. Thor only will be able to wield it. Now I am not afraid of the judgment the dwellers in Asgard will give." "The dwellers in Asgard will have to give judgment to us," Brock cried out. "No more wonderful or more profitable gifts than these have ever been brought into Asgard," Sindri said. "Thy head is saved, and thou wilt be able to take the head of Loki, who is insolent to us. Bring it here, and we will throw it into the fire in the forge." The Aesir and the Vanir were seated in the council house of Asgard when a train of dwarves appeared before them. Brock came at the head of the train and was followed by a band of dwarves carrying things of great weight. Brock and his attendees stood around the throne of Odin and hearkened to the words of the father of the gods. "We know why you came into Asgard out of Svartheim," Odin said. "You have brought things wonderful and profitable to the dwellers in Asgard. Let what you brought us be seen, Brock. If they are more wonderful and more useful than the things Loki has brought out of Svartheim, the spear Gungnir and the boat Skidbaldner, we will give judgment for you." Then Brock commanded the dwarves to wait on him to show the dwellers in Asgard the first wonders that Sindri had made. He brought out the boar, the golden bristle. Round and round the council house the boar flew, leaving a track of brightness. The dwellers in Asgard said to one another that this boar was a wonder indeed, but none would say that the boar was a better thing to have in Asgard than the spear that would hit the mark no matter how badly it was flung. hung, or the boat skid Baldr that would sail on any sea and that could be folded up so small that it could fit in anyone's pocket. None would say that the gold bristle was better than these wonders. To Frey, who was chief of the Vanir, Brock gave the wondrous boar. Then the attending dwarves showed the arm ring that was as bright as the circle of the sun. All admired the noble ring. And when it was told how every 9th night this ring dropped 8 rings of gold that were like itself, the dwellers in Asgard spoke aloud, all saying that drop near the ring of increase was a wonder indeed. Hearing their voices raised, Brock looked triumphantly at Loki, who was standing there with his lips drawn closely together. To Odin, the father of the gods, Brock gave the noble arm ring. Then he commanded the attending dwarves to lay before Thor the hammer, Mjolnir. Thor took the hammer up and swung it around his head, and as he did so, he uttered a great cry. And the eyes of the dwellers of Asgard lighted up when they saw Thor with the hammer Mjolnir in his hands. Their eyes lighted up, and from their lips came the cry, "This is a wonder indeed." With this hammer in his hand, none can withstand Thor, our champion. No greater thing has ever come into Asgard than the hammer Mjolnir. Then Odin, the father of the gods, spoke from his throne, giving judgment. The hammer Mjolnir that the dwarf Brock has brought into Asgard is a thing wonderful indeed and profitable to the gods. In Thor's hands, it can crush mountains. It can hurl the giant race from the ramparts of Asgard. Sindri the dwarf has forged a greater thing than the spear Gungnir and the boat skid Baldr. There can be no other judgment. Brock looked at Loki, showing his gnarled teeth. "Now, Loki, yield your head, he cried. "Do not ask such a thing," said Odin. "Put any other penalty on Loki for mocking you and tormenting you. Make him yield to you the greatest thing that is in his power to give." Not so, screamed Brock. "You dwellers in Asgard would shield one another, but what of me? Loki would have taken my head had I lost the wager. Loki has lost his head to me. Let him kneel down now, and I will cut it off." Loki came forward, smiling with closed lips. "I kneel before you, dwarf," he said. "Take off my head, but be careful. Do not touch my neck. I did not bargain that you should touch my neck. If you do, I shall call upon the dwellers in Asgard to punish you." Brock drew back with a snarl. "Is this the judgment of the gods?" he said. "The bargain you made, Brock," said Odin, "was an evil one, and all its evil consequences you must bear." Brock, in a rage, looked upon Loki, and he saw that his lips were smiling. He stamped his feet with rage. Then he came up to Loki and said, "I may not take your head, but I could do something with your lips that mock me." "What would you do, dwarf?" said Thor. "Sew Loki's lips together," said Brock, "so that he can do no more mischief with his talk. You dwellers in Asgard cannot forbid me to do this. Down, Loki, on your knees before me." Loki looked around on the dwellers of Asgard, and he saw in their judgment that he must kneel before the dwarf. He knelt down with a frown upon his brow. "Draw your lips together, Loki," said Brock. Loki drew his lips together while his eyes flashed fire. With an awl that he took from his belt, Brocky pierced Loki's lips. He took out a thong and tightened them together. Then, in triumph, the dwarf looked at Loki. "Oh, Loki," he said, "you boasted that the dwarves who worked for you were better craftsmen than Sindri, my brother. Your words have shown to be lies, and now you cannot boast for a while." Then Brock the dwarf, with his great majesty, walked out of the council house of Asgard, and the attending dwarves marched behind him in procession. Down the passage in the earth the dwarves went, singing the song of Brock's triumph over Loki, and in Svartheim it was told forever how Sindri and Brock had prevailed. In Asgard, now that Loki's lips were closed, there was peace and a respite from mischief. No one among the Aesir or the Vanir were sorry when Loki had to walk about in silence with his head bent low.